really smooth, trust me.
Perfect.
Plus it's
Make us look good.
Now's a good time to like have a cough and get loosened up.
Yeah, exactly. Loosen up, mate. Okay, so here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Goway Industry Insiders webinar series. This is where you can hear and learn from the best in the industry, pick up insider tips and tricks, follow the stories of proven and successful travel industry professionals, all the while journeying into the exotic worlds of Goway. Today, we are welcoming from the west coast of North America, Los Angeles, for Amy. Katie, you in LA as well?
I'm in beautiful Victoria, BC.
Oh, of course, yes. So, actually, we've got Canadian and US representation today because I'm in Toronto, Canada. So we got East West Coast Canada and California, which is Amy. And the two ladies you see in front of you are Katie Olsson. Katie, you want to say hi so people can see
Hi, everyone.
who you are?
I'm Katie.
Yeah, and Katie is the National Account Manager from Air New Zealand, and Amy Agudo is from the Tourism Development, or is a Tourism Development Executive, from Tourism New Zealand. And by the way, and I think by the way of those introductions, everyone out there should know who we're talking about, where we're talking about today, and that is New Zealand. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get going, I always like to ask our guests for a little background on themselves so our audience can have a better understanding of who they're listening to and who they're seeing on the screen, as the case may be. So as such, let's start with Katie. You want to give us a little background on yourself, Katie, and your links to Air New Zealand?
Sure. Nice to see everyone here. Yes, I'm Katie Olsson, Air New Zealand. I am a proud Kiwi Canadian, born in the Yukon, grew up in New Zealand, now living in Victoria. Been in the travel industry for a while, starting out with Intrepid Travel, then with Air Canada Vacations briefly, and then I've been with Air New Zealand since 2018. So a little while now, and a break during COVID, and then very happy to be back.
Katie, I might have met you when you were in Intrepid.
Yes, that was likely when it was, Don, because I was living in Toronto then too.
Okay, Kate, thank you very much for that. Amy, you want to give us a little background on yourself, please?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Amy Agudo, and as Don mentioned, I am the Trade Development Executive for Tourism New Zealand. I started off actually as a reservation agent for Pleasant Holidays back in the day in my early 20s. And from there, just worked my way into marketing, became a marketing manager for them. From there, went to actually Alma Waterways, did a little bit of work for them, and worked for the Los Cabos Tourism Board as well. So I'm familiar with the travel industry. I love it. There's nothing like it. And I'm super excited to be taking on New Zealand now. It's such a unique destination, unlike anything else.
So going out of order of my questions here, have you been to New Zealand, Amy?
Not yet. I've only been here for 6 months, but I'm actually going on Friday.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll probably whet your appetite. Yes, we're going to achieve two things. We've got Amy's knowledge, obviously Katie's knowledge, and we're going to whet Amy's appetite as well as our listeners' appetite to New Zealand. So let me just do a bit of a spiel of sales on New Zealand here. New Zealand has become world famous in recent years for many reasons, but in our world it has grown in popularity because it is simply enchanting, and that's an Australian saying it. But I do mean what I say.
Big, having an Australian
really
say
big,
that.
Yeah. Stunningly beautiful, cosmopolitan, and it's a cultural destination as well. And for those listening on this webinar, we are actually going to have a podcast coming up soon where we talk in more depth about the culture of New Zealand as well. It has everything a traveller could ask for, from adventure to luxury, wine to beach, trekking to spa getaways, sports, wine, cruises, and self-drives. Today's focus, however, will be a little bit away from the main sights and sounds that one would expect when you look at a trip to New Zealand. Of course, people will still want to go to all the big sites, which we will touch on in a minute. But we really want to focus today on all the other, or not all the other side of New Zealand. Maybe the lesser visited sites might be the right term to go and see. Because like most countries, the big sites draw people in, particularly on a first visit. But there's so much more to any country than the big sites. And New Zealand, albeit a small country, has so much more to offer, again, outside the big sites. So on the subject of the big sites, just a little bit of geography for people out there. There are two islands, the North and South Island. But let me go to Katie on this one. Are there other islands near to the main islands which are New Zealand?
Well,
I've never thought about this. Are there? Or is it just the two islands?
you know that most New Zealanders refer to Australia as the West Island. So, you know, we kind of include you guys in there. But yeah, of course, New Zealand does have the two main islands, but the one that's often forgotten is the one that's at the bottom of the South Island, Stewart Island. It's just such an incredible destination, and if you get a chance to head down there, go for sure. I know, Amy, you've been doing a little bit of research on Stewart Island recently, and you had some good information to share about that.
Oh, sorry, pressed pause on accident. But yeah, so there's actually 3 islands, as Katie has said. So we're starting off with the North Island. It's the smaller of the two islands and of the 2 main islands, but it's the most populous, and it's known for its landscapes, including the volcanic plateaus, the geothermal areas, and the sandy beaches. The most popular and the well-known city there is Auckland, actually, but we also have Wellington, Hamilton, and Tauranga.
So North Island, for those listening, that would be, again, home to some of the classic sites you would see in New Zealand, which would be the volcanic and the thermal area up around, what's the name of the Rotorua? I think in Rarotonga for some reason, Rotorua. Of course, and as you mentioned, Auckland, the main city on the North Island, city of sails, because it's a harbour city, lots of people out on the harbour. So there's some famous sites there. There's also coastal areas which has wine, etc. The South Island, what would be the main famous site on the South Island?
So the South Island is really known for its dramatic natural scenery. So top of mind, everybody wants to see the glaciers and the fjords and the pristine lakes that go along with it. It's a really, really great place to do some skiing, hiking, and adventure sports. And Queenstown is actually a really great place to do snowboarding. Something that many people may not know is that our summer months here in North America are actually their winter months. So if you're feeling tired of the summer out here, go on over to New Zealand and hit the slopes. And something else that I wanted to touch on too is Stewart Island is actually very, very, very small, but it's the best place to see kiwis, actually. And they have some fantastic walks as well. It can be done as a day trip, so very easily accessible from the South Island.
And just to clarify, when Amy says see kiwis, we're not talking about the people, because that's what New Zealanders are referred to, those who may not know. It's a kiwi. And a kiwi, is it your national bird, the kiwi?
It is.
So the kiwi, yes, that Amy's referring to is the bird. And so you're saying there's a higher likelihood of seeing kiwis on Stewart Island?
Correct, yeah. So I believe, Katie, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very untouched, Stewart Island. It's not, and that's why it lends more to animals taking over this part of this island in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yes, not many people
Stewart
go
Island,
there.
Oh, sorry,
no,
Kate. Yeah, okay. Well, that actually leads to my next question. Is the island inhabited by people?
Yes.
People living there?
Yes, people do live there. And my Canadian in-laws and my parents, who you could classify as boomers, they both went recently and had the time of their lives. And even my father-in-law, who gets a little bit seasick, he managed to handle the ferry across there. Okay, with the help of some wristbands, but yeah, they had such a wonderful time there. It's a little bit like the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. If you have interest in going to places like the Orkney Islands or the Shetlands, Stewart Island can provide that type of rugged wilderness experience, and the locals there are very, very proud to be Stewart Islanders.
So just a couple of questions on that. So you mentioned a ferry. So that's the way you access Stewart Island, by ferry from the South Island?
Across Fova.
And as it would be quite far south, is it a summer, being Kiwi summer destination, or can you visit year-round? Or you can, but you wouldn't want to do it in the wintertime?
You can visit year-round. They don't get as much snow in Stewart Island as they would do in other parts of the South Island because it's coastal and so it's warmer. You go inland, and that's where you'll get the cooler temperatures. But yeah, it's a spectacular place, but you really do have to make an effort to get there. But once you do get there, you're rewarded for your efforts, for sure.
Okay. So what's the gateway from the South Island to get to Stewart Island?
Invercargill.
Invercargill, okay. Is it a car ferry or normal ferry or both?
It's both, and you can also fly.
Oh, you can, from Invercargill across?
Yes.
Is that the only air connection, just Invercargill?
Now, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Amy, do you know for sure?
I was going to say, I believe so as well. I'm not entirely sure on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something that you would obviously connect to when you hit the south of the South Island.
Yes.
So on the subject of flying, and as we have a Air New Zealand representative sitting here with us,
Oh, your lucky day.
I'm going to ask the question. I think I know the answer I'm going to get. What's the best way to get from North America down to New Zealand?
Let me think about that.
Think about that.
Yeah, fly with Air New Zealand.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think, obviously being the national carrier of New Zealand, it's great to be able to kind of experience the destination as soon as you step on board our aircraft. But I'm also going to be fair here. There are other airlines that do fly to New Zealand, which is wonderful for connecting our country to the rest of the world. And so there are options there. I know a lot of people who are cruising to New Zealand as well. So that's something else to consider. But I think there's often a misconception that New Zealand is really far away. And I always have to remind people that, especially if you're flying from the West Coast to North America, be it Los Angeles, San Francisco, Vancouver, even going from Houston, Chicago, New York, it's just an overnight flight. And so, especially if you're coming from the West Coast, you get on board the aircraft, you eat dinner, you watch a movie, you fall asleep, and you wake up the next morning and you're there. So
Nice.
it's fast. It's closer than what most people think.
Yeah, agreed. And that's again, Australia's a little bit further away,
Exactly.
but we get that. But we get those questions from people about New Zealand and Australia, and that's what we say. It's an overnight flight,
Yep.
dinner, a couple of glasses of wine, movie, and
Yes.
you're there.
And
again, sorry, go
Oh,
on.
no, I was just going to say too, the time difference as well. Even though at the moment it's a 21-hour time difference, if you look at it the other way, New Zealand's right now only 3 hours behind us on the West Coast. So
Right, yeah,
your jet
yeah.
lag is minimal.
Is minimal. Okay. So I think you just mentioned the gateways, but you just want to go over those again a bit slowly for New Zealand out of the US and Canada?
Yeah, so from Canada, our main hub is Vancouver. Out of the US, Los Angeles is our number one hub. We fly out of San Francisco, Houston, Chicago, and then just over a year ago, we launched our service direct to New York. So it's a 17-hour flight from New York City, but it gets you there in one shot. And you can also fly with other airlines out of Dallas as well. And you can fly direct with our partner United from San Francisco to Christchurch, whereas all those other gateways fly direct to Auckland.
Right. And it's also worth noting, which I learned when I was in the Cook Islands recently, that getting to New Zealand is also a good hub if you want to then journey into the Pacific Islands, Tahiti, Fiji,
Exactly.
the Cooks as well. Yeah. So there's lots of options for regional exploration as well as New Zealand. And of course, culturally, all those islands and countries are related through the Polynesian culture as well. So there's a lot of very close ties there as well. So we looked at the gateways out of North America. One of the main gateways you did mention Christchurch out of, I think you said Dallas.
San Francisco.
But the main gateway, like I'll preempt your answer here, would be Auckland. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So Auckland is the main international airport in New Zealand, but Christchurch is growing as well.
Okay. And if someone did want to combine Australia and New Zealand, the gateways between the two countries, one is Auckland. Can you connect?
Yep.
From the South Island into Australia as well?
You can, yeah. So you can connect through Christchurch, you can connect through Queenstown, you can also connect through Wellington. So there's lots of options there for people who are looking for that dual destination holiday.
Yeah. Can one of you or both of you name the top 10, again, it doesn't have to be 10, just name the top sites that people would expect for New Zealand so we can cover that before we get on to discussing some of the lesser visited sites and sounds. So Rotorua is one we mentioned, which is thermal springs. What else would people expect on a first trip to New Zealand?
Amy could probably tell us where she's
going.
I'll start
this one off. Yeah. I'll start this one off. Just the first things that come to mind, you have Milford Sound, which is unlike anything other. It's beautiful, and you can explore it by boat cruise or a scenic flight. You're going to see cascading waterfalls and dramatic cliffs. It's just a fantastic way to get in touch with the nature of New Zealand. There's also my personal favorite, and something I hope to see very soon, is the Franz Josef Glacier and Fox Glacier. So these are just what they sound like. They're beautiful glaciers located on the west coast of the South Island. And it's incredible. You can do a heli hike, or you can do a guided hike, which is something that is on my personal list. And yes, we also briefly touched about the Rotorua geothermal area. So not only can you see volcanoes, but you can also experience bubbling mud pools, steaming geysers, and colorful hot springs. And you can't talk about New Zealand without talking about the Hobbiton movie set. I wouldn't say forced, but I've seen the three movies. And, even though I'm not an outright fan, seeing just where these beautiful scenes were taken is just incredible. If you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, it does really look like it was shot in another world. And Hobbiton is actually known for having good food, believe it or not. And they do really go above and beyond to make you feel like a hobbit yourself. So the portion sizes are relatively big. I know that they serve everything in giant bowls, and they really go above and beyond to make sure you get the full experience.
Right. And so there's some of the big sites. Queenstown we mentioned, which is both a winter and a summer destination. Adventure Centre for the most part, Milford Sound. The other thing about New Zealand in general is you can explore it. You can connect internally by air. You can self-drive, which is very, very popular, particularly with RVs or camper vans or motorhomes, depending on your choice of word. There is small coach touring. There is large coach touring. And you can even cruise around both the North and South Island, a la Captain Cook, as he was one of the original navigator and charter of the islands of New Zealand as well. So there are lots of options to get around and see all the sites. Just a quick fact, if you were to drive tip of North Island to the tip of South Island, how long would it take? Just to give people an idea of the size of New Zealand.
If you're going from Auckland to Wellington, that's about 8 hours. And then if you're going from Auckland up to Cape Reinga, even though it might not look as long distance-wise, you get into some pretty narrow, windy roads as you get further north, and you also want to stop off along the way. But if you were to do that in one hit, you're looking at about another 4 hours up there. So around 12 hours top to bottom for the North Island. But something for North Americans to always consider when driving in New Zealand. Obviously, you're driving on the other side of the road, but we don't tend to have those long straight highways that you have in North America. Our roads are very windy. There often isn't a shoulder on the road, and New Zealand drivers, they're known for knowing their roads and driving relatively quickly. So as tourists, it's always good to take your time and stop regularly along the way.
Yeah, and I will overlay a map of New Zealand sitting on North America for people who live in North America, and the two ladies, Californian and someone in Victoria. US, Canada, big, as is Australia, but New Zealand is much smaller. So my point is there's a lot to see and do, but it is a small country to get around, and there are, again, many, many ways of getting around, as we just touched on. So we sort of touched on the big sites. So let's look at some of the lesser-known sites, and let's start on the North Island. So, Katie, what would you look at on the North Island that people may not know about that you would highly recommend that they add to a New Zealand itinerary?
There's so many. I grew up on the North Island. I grew up in Northland, in a small town called Mangawhai, which is about 90 minutes north of Auckland. It's where a lot of Aucklanders will come for their summer holidays. So I would often suggest to people to come north. When you arrive in Auckland, a lot of people just head south and go to places like Rotorua and Taupo and go down to Wellington. But when you go to Northland, you see a side of New Zealand that is very untouched, very rugged, but also very beautiful. There's beaches in Northland that are equal to any that you might find in Europe, the Caribbean, and the South Pacific. If you come over to the west coast of Northland, you drive through areas like the Hokianga Harbour. Just spectacular coastline driving there. Traveling through small places like Rawene and Opanoni, some of the best fish and chips I have ever had. You just pull over on the side of the road and enjoy that. You can drive through amazing forests of kauri trees that are 1,000 years old, and really feel like you're the only person around for miles and miles. So Northland, I think, is a hidden gem that a lot of people don't get to. They maybe go to the Bay of Islands, but then don't see the west coast of it. Other places, I really love Taranaki. It's the kind of the big nose of the North Island, if you like, on the west coast, dominated by Mount Taranaki. But if you want to see New Zealand farmland at its finest, that's fantastic there. There's an area just north of Wellington called the Mangaweka Gorge. My parents were just there camping with my sister recently. Spectacular landscape and hardly any people there. So I think there's so many little spots that you can stop off along the way if you're driving through the North Island. And you'll think, gosh, if I was somewhere else in North America or Europe, there would be thousands of other people. And here I am enjoying it to myself.
So on the flip side of that, getting away from the crowds, which is a plus to most, is there infrastructure there for a traveller to take advantage of, hotels or otherwise, if they do want to get into these lesser visited regions?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Kiwis, they're really known for their hospitality. And I think back to my childhood in New Zealand and the number of times that my mum would be down at the local grocery store and she'd come back with some German or Canadian backpacker who she invited back to our house for dinner that night. And so, you'll never get stranded in New Zealand. There are always little bed and breakfasts around the place or little motels or hotels. But if you're stuck, someone will help you and they'll invite you back to their house that night and take care of you. So Kiwis are incredibly hospitable people.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So there is a friendly rivalry between Aussies and Kiwis. But it is a known fact that Kiwis, for the most part, are very, very friendly and welcoming. And as a traveller, for sure, if you're in trouble, they will look after you without a doubt. Amy, do you want to handle the South Island when it comes to lesser visited areas?
Yeah. So as far as the South Island goes and some unique places that are less heard of, Catlin's is a good one. It's a golden coastline where you can see penguins and sea lions, waterfalls, and even a petrified forest. While you're there, you can visit the Nugget Point Lighthouse, or something that actually interests me is Jack's Blowhole, which is actually a blowhole that's 55 meters deep and 200 meters from the coastline. So when there are heavy swells out on the Southern Ocean, the waves actually get compressed through an underground tunnel and they explode up and out of the blowhole. So it's really, really cool. I mean, where else are you going to find that? And something or another area of the South Island that is unique is actually Dunedin. It has strong Scottish heritage because it was actually founded by Scottish settlers in the 19th century. And it's very well known for its preserved Victorian and Edwardian architecture. But while it's known for this, let's say, vintage architecture, it does have a young feeling to it because it's also home to the University of Otago, which is actually New Zealand's oldest university. So that in itself gives the city a youthful feeling.
I was a Scarfie, as the students from the University of Otago are known, for 4 years, and I can 100% attest to everything Amy said there. Dunedin is just a gorgeous little city, and if you can head south from there and travel through the Catlins, it's just magnificent.
Yeah, because a lot of people will, again, hit the beat. Again, I guess the better known cities would be Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Queenstown for obvious reasons. So that goes again, I would suggest that Dunedin would be less visited than the other bigger cities. So again, a more Kiwi experience. One thing a lot of people may not associate New Zealand with, and you've already mentioned it, I think, Katie, a few times, beach. When I went years and years and years and years ago with a friend of mine who I work with in Australia, we went over and visited him. And to my surprise, a lot of our time was spent on the beach, and it was Cool. It was as good as any Australian beach. So you want to expand on the beach experiences that you can have in and around New Zealand?
Sure, yeah. I grew up on the beach. Like Christmases were at the beach.
Yeah.
My kids here, I tell them that Christmas time in New Zealand, Santa Claus arrives on a boat wearing jandals, his flip-flops, and and that's just such a Kiwi summertime experience. But yeah, there's a whole range of beaches in New Zealand which I think make them even more spectacular. Where I grew up on the east coast of the northern part of the North Island, white sand beaches, just that kind of stereotypical Pacific Island looking spot. But on the west coast of Auckland, you have black sand beaches, and those are just amazingly rugged. If you've ever seen the movie called The Piano, came out a long time ago now, but that movie was filmed on the west coast Auckland beaches, and it's just spectacular. Got the Tasman Sea rolling in there, and it's a great spot to go swimming. But always, as they say in New Zealand, swim between the flags. There are some strong riptides on the west coast there, and swimming between the flags means the lifeguards will be there looking out for you. But when you go down to the South Island, you don't really think about beaches there so much because it is the cooler part of New Zealand, but there's lovely spots around many of the lakes in the South Island, the Abel Tasman, for instance. Around that area, there's just these amazing yellow sand beaches. Kaiteriteri is a main one in that region that's just gorgeous, and you can go kayaking around there. You could rent a fishing boat for a day. So yeah, all of the activities around the coast and on all the different types of beaches give you such a unique experience.
Yeah, and again, obviously go on, Amy.
Oh, sorry. I do want to add to that. These are all great experiences. And I wanted to add also Hot Water Beach.
Yes.
Very unique to the destination. So it's in the Coromandel, and it's very, very cool, very unique. You dig your own spa, basically.
Yeah.
So there's little shovels lined up. You don't have to bring your own. You can just ask somebody. Again, the Kiwi nature is very, very friendly. So you ask somebody for their shovel, you dig a hole in the sand, and you can enjoy the naturally heated mineral water that's deep within the earth. So
yeah, it's really cool. You just kind of wallow in the sand and the warm water.
It's really cool in the warm waters, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's an obvious statement, I guess, when you think about it, because New Zealand is primarily 2 islands, 3 really we've learned today. Therefore coastal, therefore lots of beaches. So I wouldn't be recommending New Zealand as a beach holiday, i.e. lie on the beach and whatnot. You can do that, of course, but more the activities that come along with coastal experiences. And one we just learned about was what was the hot beach? Is that what it was called, Amy?
Hot Water Beach.
Oh, sorry, Hot Water Beach. And then you have your black sand beaches and your traditional beaches and all the fishing and kayaking and stuff that goes with it. So a beach-based, coastal-based holiday, let's put it that way, New Zealand is primed for. So one thing that Australia and to a lesser degree New Zealand is known for is its wildlife. Again, Australia's got some really weird stuff. The kiwi bird is pretty weird in itself. But many wouldn't necessarily think of New Zealand as a wildlife destination. But I do know for a fact that there is some really cool stuff to see down there outside some of the, again, more famous birds and mammals and otherwise. So one of you ladies, let's go with Katie, want to expand on wildlife experiences in New Zealand?
Oh, sure. Well,
can actually,
I think Amy
take this one for her.
The only comment that I'll make on this is that unlike Australia, we don't have any of those creepy crawlies like you do. So
now that's a big selling point.
It's a huge selling point. And every time I've gone to Australia, I think, I'm not sure if I could live here, all these spiders. But I'll let Amy expand on all of the wonderful creatures that New Zealand does have that are not going to try and kill you.
Yeah, we always live to lead with that. I think it's one of our strengths. On the island, on both islands, we actually don't have anything that can harm you. I think the worst thing we have are mosquitoes. So that's really unusual, unlike our friends over in Australia. But besides birds, you can also see a lot of whale watching, so marine mammals as well. But the cool thing is that New Zealand is one of the only places where whales can actually be seen year round, and also penguins. Penguins, as many know, are actually there are several species of penguins in New Zealand. The most iconic one being the little blue penguin. It's the world's smallest penguin and can only be found in New Zealand. So a lot of people will come on over to take a look at them, actually. Reptiles are really big in New Zealand as well. They're well-known animal for New Zealand is actually reptiles. The tautura is actually a rare reptile found only in New Zealand. And this is just an example of the types of reptiles that are located out there. So something unique about them is that they are the last survivors of an order of reptiles that actually were alive during the age of dinosaurs. So when you think of it through that lens, it's incredible to think about, you have these living creatures that basically knew the dinosaurs. And last but not least, there's lots of insects. Again, nothing that can hurt you, but something that we do like to encourage our visitors to do is the Waitomo glowworm caves. So it's just exactly as it sounds. You go in a cave and you get to see the beautiful illumination of these glowworms. And just spend some time with them. Look at them in their natural elements. I believe Katie was actually going to share an interesting fact.
No, it's just that something about New Zealand, small country, and how we love our animals. The tuatara, as Amy was mentioning, it used to be on the 5-cent coin in New Zealand. That's how important it is to New Zealanders.
Well, there you go. And you two are probably aware because you're in North America. Well, I think a lot of Kiwis are aware as well. But John Oliver, who does a show here, jumped in on, what was it? It wasn't a national bird vote. It was favorite bird vote or something like that. Yeah, and his bird, which I can't remember the name, it had a very funny name, which is why he chose it.
It was so funny.
Something out of Puto or something like that. Something.
I know, and it became...
So Katie's going to look it up for us.
It became like, here we go. It's the first thing that comes up. Oh, yeah. The Puteki Teki. Yeah.
John Oliver waged a war.
I don't just want the Puteki Teki to win. I want it to win in the biggest landslide in the history of this magnificent competition. Puteki Teki.
Teki Teki.
A war he won.
New Zealand's bird of the century is the Puteki Teki.
Let's call it what it is. Foreign interference.
Yeah,
it was like
Teki
New Zealand
and
Bird of the Year, and so that's
go.
what it was.
Yeah, and of course, John Oliver jumped onto it because he has a love-hate relationship with New Zealand, and he overtook the competition. His bird won, and he basically said it's very important to the Kiwis, their birds, which it is, and they are some beautiful birds. It's a very good-looking bird, actually, if you ask me.
Agree.
There you go. Okay, so we've talked wildlife. We've talked some of the other things to see and do. Now, we have mentioned Queenstown once or twice, which, if people aren't aware by now, it's very much a adventure destination, or centre, I should say, from skiing, jet boating, bungee jumping, snowboarding, the works down in that particular area. But what other adventure options are there available outside, again, the main famous centre of Queenstown?
Oh, I can jump in here. I've spent many years living on the South Island and, doing a lot of these activities. So while Queenstown's famous for activities like the shot over jet and AJ Hackett bungee, there's also been significant growth over the last few years in cycling. And so all the cycle trails across the country have grown exponentially just in the last 10 years. And a lot of people are going out and either just using regular bikes or e-bikes. You hire them when you're there. And for instance, the Centro Otago Rail Trail is one that comes to mind. So that's something that a lot of people are looking to do while they're traveling through the South Island. There's now all of the great walks of New Zealand, which in New Zealand you call hiking tramping. And so some of the famous ones are the Milford Track or the Rootburn, but there's also the Kepler, there's Abel Tasman, there's so many others, and always encourage people to book those nice and early because there's huts along the way that you stay at. So you can do that the hard way, if you like, by carrying all your own gear, or you can do it in a very nice way where you have others carry your things and cook for you when you arrive. And one that comes to mind is the Hollyford Track. There's a company called the Hollyford Experience, and you can have all of your belongings, brought along to the hut for you at night, and you still get to experience the wonderful wilderness. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I've done the Inca Trail many times. People carry my stuff.
You're
not
lucky.
only does it give employment to local people, it is the way to do it.
It is.
Just focus on your trekking and the sights and sounds around you. On the note of the walks you mentioned, were they all South Island, or is there a mix of South and North Island?
Yeah, all the
options?
ones I mentioned are South Island, but there are a number in the North Island as well.
Okay. Okay, so we've hit, I think, well, from the experts, because I don't know the lesser-known sites, that's why we're here. Are there any other areas you would like to touch on before we say goodbye?
Oh, gosh.
Or have we been really good at our job and covered everything?
I feel like we haven't quite touched on the east coast of the North Island. The east coast of the North Island, areas like Napier, Hastings, Gisborne. This is the Hawke's Bay region of New Zealand, where a lot of North Americans will be familiar with the wine grown there, particularly our Sauvignon Blanc grapes. But cities like Napier, the architecture there is spectacular. In the early 19th...
Is this the town
earthquake?
where it's all retro... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so in the early 1930s, there was a big earthquake and it completely flattened the town of Napier, and they rebuilt the entire town in the popular Art Deco style. And so a lot of people go there to see it. And then also the food and wine around that area is just gorgeous. But when you head up further north from Gisborne around the East Cape there, again, that's a little bit similar to the northern part of Northland. It's an area that people don't always get to go to. It's quite rugged. You'll see a lot of Indigenous culture there. And again, there's another movie that people might have seen called Boy, and that was filmed in that area. So the landscapes that you'll see on screen, you'll get to experience in real life.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons New Zealand has come to the forefront of people's minds when travelling is a lot to do with the film industry as well. A lot of films have been filmed out. Again, the biggest of recent times would be the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But
that was more than 20 years ago now, though.
Piano. Yeah, I know. Yeah, good point. So there's that Boy, the piano as well. And, of course, through that, and the director, Peter Jackson, correct me if I'm wrong here, ladies, he's turned New Zealand into a production centre for filming in general. With New Zealand as a backdrop and sometimes just as a place to produce films. So not only has New Zealand become more on the world stage in regards to tourism, it's also been their finances and politics as well, particularly during COVID, and your Prime Minister at the time.
Jacinda Ardern.
I've forgotten her first name, Ardern. Yeah, sorry, Jacinda Ardern was making news over here in North America. With her
if you like spotting Hollywood stars, you never know who you're going to sit next to on your next Air New Zealand flight.
Oh, it's true.
There's another reason to get down there.
They are filming actually Minecraft and the next Moana, of course.
Really?
That's going to probably spark some interest. But Minecraft is the next big project.
Oh, really? Okay, so I guess so. Outside the Lord of the Rings, any film buffs will find a lot of recognisable sites in New Zealand as well. So again, there are so many different angles to New Zealand, from wildlife, adventure, beach, which we discussed, wine, self-driving, coach touring, Hollywood sightseeing, or famous sites of films as well. So it's obviously a country that has, in a small area, so much to offer. One thing we haven't touched on in depth now, because we are going to do a podcast on it, but it's definitely has to be mentioned, is the culture of New Zealand, and most people will be aware of that being Māori. So what cultural experiences can be had either, mainstream, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean, the more famous ones, to some of the less known cultural experiences that can be had in New Zealand?
He toa takitini. We are not one, but many.
So, I'll take this one. So, if you're looking for culture experiences, you can find it on both islands, but the North Island is actually specifically where all of the best culture experiences will be. Well, I wouldn't say best, but because most of the Maori people, that's where they originated from. So some of the lesser known experiences that you can do is actually, and we'll touch more on this in the podcast, but something called the Footprints of Kupe experience, which is essentially a 75-minute multisensory journey. And it's just basically you're walking with a guide and they're teaching you about the Maori traditions and Maori culture. Similarly, we have also the Te Puia, which is actually located in Rotorua as well. And this is home to the New Zealand Maori Arts and Crafts Institute. So actually all of the money that they get from this establishment and from doing these tours, they actually go into facilitating the teachings of the next generation. So they use this place, yes, to teach these stories because as you might know, Maori is very, very big on storytelling. That's how they pass down these traditions. And anything that they create, like let's say basket weaving or any arts and crafts that they create can actually be commissioned and sold, which is, and what other destination are you going to say that you bought something that was created from truly the locals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people understand, and again, we'll delve into this in more detail on the podcast, is that the Māori culture is not something that's sitting on the side of modern-day New Zealand. It is modern-day New Zealand. It's interwoven into modern-day culture. So I don't want to disparage any other original cultures, but, in Australia, when you are opened or experience Aboriginal culture, it is somewhat on the tourist side, whereas in New Zealand, again, ladies, please correct me if I'm wrong here, like to me, and my experience is that, again, it's not on the side. It is New Zealand these days. It's white New Zealand versus the Māori culture has been completely accepted from both sides of the fence and interwoven, and it's just what New Zealand is today. And again, we'll go into more details of that in the podcast. But am I wrong in that assessment?
You're not totally wrong. But yeah, there's so many nuances to that and so many different points. Yeah. So, but I think it is definitely fair to say that, say, compared to Australia or compared to Canada or the US, the simple fact that many New Zealanders, no matter what their background is, will choose to greet you either using kia ora as hello or morena and as good morning, and utilizing the Indigenous language on a daily basis, that's not something that you see in many other countries that were colonized.
No, agree. And that's, I guess, as I say, I'm not a Kiwi. I haven't lived there. So I am saying this as a foreigner to it, which is why I was asking for your clarifications. And again, I do accept my statements are broad statements, and there are lots of nuances there, but it is a noticeable difference.
Compared to Australia,
Katie just mentioned. Yeah, compared to Australia. And, lived in Canada a fair while as well. A lot of the issues with First Nations and Indigenous populations are very similar to that of Australia. But I think New Zealand is definitely leading the world in how to incorporate both cultures into a modern society. And I think it's important people appreciate that and understand that about New Zealand, because I think that's one of the special things about when you visit, which leads back to one of Katie's early comments, that it's very, very welcoming at all levels. And you will see that when you visit there. So on that, what I think is a positive note, I'd like to thank Amy and Katie today for talking to us about the expected New Zealand and the unexpected New Zealand. So if you do have any more questions about anything we've discussed today, please reach out to one of Goway's destination specialists. They're well aware of all the areas that the ladies have mentioned today, and they can help you work that into your itinerary, be it your first visit, second or third visit to New Zealand, because a lot of people do go back 2, 3, 4 times. And we'd be more than happy to assist with that. Of course, Air New Zealand, main way to get there. They have been very good partners to Goway for many, many years. So I'm not saying that because Katie's sitting here. I'm saying that because we've had a very good working relationship, and they are an excellent airline into the South Pacific in general, but obviously to New Zealand. And they probably have some of the best airline safety videos ever. They're really inventive with that.
And we're also the world's safest airline too, Don. We were just voted that this year.
Safest over Qantas? Really? How's that happened? Oh, I know. Okay, this is my
Here's the Australian coming out.
yeah, exactly.
It's good
it was
banter.
always Qantas. Hey, put it this way: Australia and New Zealand, we have our rivalries, but we're also buddies. So it's good to
100%.
know that Qantas and New Zealand are equal. But it sounds like Katie's telling me New Zealand are the safest. So either way, they're good stats to know. And on that point, I'd like to thank everyone for listening in today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks, everyone.